Oh, but I am eight,
Oh, he
seven,
is.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, good morning. I would now like to call to order the February 6, 2025 meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bess.
Here.
Ms. DeLosa.
Present.
Mr. Durham.
Here.
Dr. Ernest.
Here.
Mr. Gassnow.
Here.
Ms. Hamill.
Here.
Mr. Mapes is not in attendance. Ms. Moat.
Here.
Ms. Rentschler also not in attendance. Mr. Watts.
Here.
Dr. Jenner.
Here.
We have quorum.
Excellent. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
The motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January 15th, 2025 meeting?
So moved. Second.
With a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So great to see everyone. The February board meeting. I think we've talked about this before. Sometimes in education, the January to spring break crunch is extra intense and hopefully focused in our classrooms. We are, just to let the board know, and you're probably aware of this, there's a lot of sickness going around, influenza A, influenza B. So just a big shout out to all of our schools for trying to keep the spaces as clean, disinfected as possible, so that our kids can keep learning. And also we have focused so much on absenteeism. And today, as we talk about the NAEP scores, I don't know that we'll get totally in the weeds of the correlation of absenteeism, but I heard a national speaker talk about that just a couple of days ago in DC, and they're seeing significant nationwide correlation between the NAEP scores and if they're getting kids back in class. On that note, if your child is sick with influenza A or B, that is a prime time to keep them at home and take care of them there. But if they're not sick, we want them in our classroom for sure, so that we can support them in building those necessary knowledge and skills. Also, a huge shout out. I walked in this morning and we have a pretty packed house this morning at the government center. And I was thinking, what is on our agenda today? That we would have so many public comments ready. But actually, we have a room full of future teachers who are from Butler. And I had a quick moment to speak with each of them and hear their grade level or their specialty area. But if our future teachers, our Butler students and professors could please stand, we'd love to give you an applause. And it looks like I may have missed a few on this side of the room, but we are so glad to have you. And more importantly, we're thrilled to welcome you into what we believe is the best and most important profession in the world. The impact you can make day in and day out is remarkable, and we're thrilled to have you here. Today, we have a couple of presentations. Our first presentation will be Dr. Len Schemmel, our Chief Academic Officer, who will present on NAEP. And I'm gonna we're gonna do the consent agenda and then bring you right up. Lynn, I know we have to move fast because Lynn is simultaneously booked for another, I think, statewide presentation. So Lynn, we will get you going as soon as possible. And then we also have some special guests here to share about their work in building out the Enlistment and Service SEAL partnership for the high school diploma. We have leaders from Ivy Tech. Dr. Travis Hare is Chancellor of Ivy Tech Sellersburg, and Colonel Sean Eakin of the Indiana National Guard, who are going to share a bit about what's possible for our schools. On that note, any other board member comments and reports? All right. Hearing none, we have no public comment today. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
With a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Sorry, I did miss discussion, but I was rolling. We've already approved it, but any discussion on those consent agenda items? I know one of the consent agenda items I will flag publicly is our special education numbers are out. We have several special education future teachers in the room. We are seeing increases in some of the areas. One in particular that I'll call out is autism. So those numbers are now publicly available. Several of our board members flagged that, and we had a lot of robust discussion prior to, but did want to mention that. Okay, let's shift on to have Dr. Schemmel so that she can get to her second presentation after this. Dr. Schemmel, if you could please share more about our NAEP scores that were released last week.
Sure, great. Thank you for having me. Wait for David to pass out.
Thanks, David.
So today we're going to take a look at the results from the 2024 NAEP reading and math assessments that were taken in grades 4 and 8. I think this is a different presentation.
Oh, that's the Ivy Tech presentation. Zoom through that fast.
Okay, all right.
I think they were scheduled to go first, but since
Sorry, Ivy Tech.
you have another presentation to do, we did a little rotation. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so just some reminders before we get into the actual data, the results. NAEP is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's a national assessment that's given across every state and in some jurisdictions such as the Department of Defense. Since it's the same assessment that's administered across all of these areas, we can compare the scores, unlike iLearn, for example, in which Indiana is the only state that uses iLearn. It's often referred to as the nation's report card. We receive overall performance for each grade and content area, as well as various student population groups. The assessment has been given for many years, so we can look at performance change over time and review differences nationally by states and by those various districts. And when we see districts in this instance, we're not talking about individual school corporations or districts within our state. It's districts such as large urban school districts that take the assessment and they look at those results together. So I just want to be clear, we don't get individual school or corporation results for Indiana. Schools are randomly, mathematically selected to participate in the assessment from each state representing the various student population groups so that we can make those comparisons. Indiana does not get to choose which schools or corporations participate. It is chosen for us. Once the schools are selected, then there are students within those schools that are selected, again, not by us, but selected nationally. And then students who are selected, they are designated to participate in either math or reading. And we greatly appreciate those schools who are chosen with their collaboration and representing our state. When this assessment is administered, it's a busy assessment time, so we know it's one more thing that they're helping us to do. This chart represents the number of students and schools who participate both nationally and in Indiana. So in Indiana, we had almost 7,000 students participate in the 2024 assessment. As I just mentioned, this assessment was administered in January to March of 2024, so schools gave it within that time frame. It is a digitally based assessment. Each student is assessed in only one content area, as I mentioned. Students only take a sample of the overall item bank, and those students who do receive accommodations get the same accommodations on the NAEP assessment.
So I just want to double down on that. We're asked this quite a bit. So no state in the country is able to choose, I want this school to take it and these students. It is completely random selection nationwide. So we are told exactly who is going to take ELA and exactly who is going to take math. So just to clarify that, as Lynn is about to jump into national data.
And again, just some more specific details around the assessment itself. We have a scale score that we'll review with the different student populations. It's on a scale of 0 to 500. Again, we're not comparing across grade levels. Again, we're looking over time and how our students are performing in each of those areas. There are four achievement levels. We call them proficiency levels here in Indiana, but we'll be looking at the number of students who achieved those various proficient levels on some of our charts. All right, so let's look at the fourth grade reading results to begin with. So this line graph shows the average scale score performance for the grade 4 reading results. As you can see, Indiana increased by 3 scale score points, while the nation decreased by 2 scale score points. With these gains, however, we can continue to think if we are, meeting or exceeding our pre-pandemic, and you can see that we are not yet.
So just to, again, flag that, and those of you in the back probably can't tell, the navy line is the national average. The orange line is Indiana. So we typically trend higher than the national average, although sometimes it's not statistically significant. You see sometimes it's closer to that national average. So also I'd flag in 2015, nationwide, obviously you can tell, and in Indiana, started seeing a drop in reading performance, which was much before the pandemic. As a country, we started to decline there. And the 22 to 24, the end is where you can see the nation went down and Indiana went up in reading.
This next chart shows those achievement level percentages that I mentioned. So we've got the 4 levels. We can see over time if we're growing students, based on those achievement levels. If we want to grow our below basic and our basic up to the proficient and the advanced, that's our goal. So we can look at the various changes here. You can see if we just look at the top area is Indiana and the bottom area is the national. If we look at those top 2 bars, that's 22 and 24. So compared to the 2022 administration, we have in Indiana fewer students are scoring below basic, and we had a 1 percentage point higher in both the basic and the advanced achievement levels over the last administration. This next chart might be a little hard to see in the back, but what this is doing is getting into some of those student populations, and they're the typical student population groups that we look at with our various assessments and look at where we might see some growth and some decline. The top line in each of those charts is Indiana, the bottom one is national. So compared to the nation, we have increases across groups. Some most notably are our students with disability, our English learners, and our Black students had increases. Compared to the average national scale score, 11 states or jurisdictions scored significantly higher than that average scale score. So you can see Indiana is in that darkest blue, and so we are one of the 11 states that's scoring significantly higher than the average scale score, and we can see 30 are scoring at, and then 11 are significantly lower. As we consider our literacy efforts and thinking about that in relation to our scores that we're looking at, We grew by 3 points, as I showed you in that first line graph. This table here shows the top 20 states ranked by their average scale score. You can see for Indiana from 2022 to 2024, so the left side is 24, the right side is 22. For Indiana this year, we are ranked 6th in the nation compared to 19th previously.
And just to flag that, that's the highest we've ever been ranked in 4th grade reading against the nation and other states. I shared this. I think we have to take a moment to acknowledge the good work happening with our teachers in schools, really focused on some of the literacy initiatives that are moving the needle, specifically like the literacy cadre. We also, though, can't pause too long. So we've already probably done the pause. We've got to keep on going. There are other states around the nation who did not get great news at all last week. And as a country, we have to keep hustling for students. And specifically in the area of reading, we'll get to math here shortly, but almost all of you in the room, I think all of you actually, will be imperative, essential to making sure our kids know how to read. So wanted to flag that.
And in our last chart that we'll look at for grade 4, same information in this chart with the ranking order, but this just shows the scale scores to show the magnitude of that difference. So you can see Indiana's there in that green box compared to the other states.
And Massachusetts has statistically, they're usually number 1 in reading, but you can see from the bell curve, they used to have more of a jump on other states than they do today, but you can see how the states obviously that are the darker blue are statistically significant in terms of higher than the national average. But all of these, you can tell I'm kind of a data nerd. I just can't get enough. But all of these are things that we'll share out with the general public so that you can take a look. You're welcome to follow up with questions. The key is we have to keep pushing if we want to stay there and keep on improving for kids.
So I had just a question on, and I think more of a verification. So this is obviously 4th grade reading. We've really been diving into science of reading and the work that we've been doing with the cadres and the cohorts and everything for the last couple of years. Is it, and while this is good, right, I mean, it's still, if you look at the 35% of our students that were way below, while it's better than 22, it's still the biggest percentage going back a decade or more, right? Mm-hmm. But my question, I guess, is it too big of a leap to say that because we've been doing this work and really focused a lot on the early grades, like, so kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, that hopefully when we come back in 26 with the next iteration of this, that we see a bigger jump just because those kids now that are getting that heavy dose of science of reading in 1st and 2nd grade will hit 4th grade. Is that fair?
Is our growth chart in here?
It is. It's the last one, so we'll get there.
Can you like zoom there?
Yeah.
I had that in my past presentations after every single one because that's the story.
Yeah.
It's not that we're number 6 in the nation. The story is what you're calling out.
Yeah.
So everybody look away so she's going to flip past.
Yeah.
Flip past.
Here. So I definitely would think in a couple of years we would see an increase. And while these students were not directly impacted by those literacy efforts, that instructional coaching that was occurring in the professional development wasn't in isolation with those 2 grade levels. So it expanded across the school. So I do think that probably has some impact.
Yeah, I mean,
I can talk about this chart if you want me to now.
I mean, this is the story right here.
Yeah, so what this chart here is showing, so when the students participate in NAEP, then when all the scores are lined up, there's percentile rankings. And so this chart then divides those students within the various percentile ranking bands. So we've got 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90 across the bottom. The blue bars that you see there, those are the increases, the increases in the average scale score among students in those various percentile bands. And so you can see our goal is that we have all of the bars above that line, 0 being that where there was no growth. We want all growing, and we want our lowest achievers growing even more to help close that gap. So you can see our lowest achievers in that 10th and the 25th percentile grew on average 4 percentile points. Our other, percentile groups grew as well. We've got 50th that grew 1, 75th grew 2, and then our 90th grew 3. So we think, those efforts were really targeted towards their lowest achievers, and so this is good news.
Yeah, and when I've been asked by folks nationally, this chart represents the biggest questions we're getting, because nationally, and I know those of you in the back cannot see, but the furthest on the right is the 90th percentile. So they would be like the students who are really excelling, right? Your highest students. And then on this side, it's the 10th percentile. Well, nationwide, we're seeing the growth happening, the recovery happening with the students in the 75th or 90th percentile. Where in Indiana, we did have progress there, but most notably, as Lynn mentioned, our lowest students are growing the most, which is really different than what other states are seeing. And that is absolutely those intervention and targeted, focusing with students who are struggling the most, that's key there. And I know we're going to talk about math, but just to flag, you all, math, we didn't have the same story. Math, yes, our ranking's going to be, respectively 9 and 13, but the huge but there is, look at our lowest students. They're not growing at all. It's quite the opposite. So that's where we have such an opportunity. Let's learn from what worked in reading and then pursue that in math. But anyway.
Okay, yeah, so while we're on the slide, I'll go ahead and talk about the others, and then so you can have that in your mind as we go back through their individual results. So the red bar then is reading grade 8. So again, we want all of our groups growing. You can see our 50th and above grew, but unfortunately our lowest achievers fell. And so we're creating larger learning gaps. So that's something that we'll want to definitely address as we continue with our literacy efforts and those push up into our middle and our secondary schools. Math, you can see math grade 4 is the yellow bar, so the third bar that you're seeing in each of those groups. Again, we can see our lowest achievers fell more behind while the others grew. And then not as big a gains, as Dr. Jenner just shared, as reading. And then the green bar is math grade 8. And you see fewer green bars on this chart. So that's definitely an area. And, we see that in our other assessments too, such as iLearn. We see those drops in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So you can see our lowest achievers drop the most, just like the red bar in 8th grade reading. And then the only growth that we saw there was with students in that 75th percentile. All right, I'm gonna go way back. Okay, so 8th grade reading results. Again, you saw those upper 50th and above were growing, 10th and 25th did not. We still saw some growth in our 8th grade reading, not as much as grade 4. So starting here, you can see that compared to the 2022 administration in Indiana, we grew 1 scale score point, while the nation also dropped in this area too by 2 scale score points. Looking at those various achievement levels, compared to the 2022 administration, more Indiana students are scoring below basic than the previous. Again, we saw that in the chart. We have fewer students in basic, and percentages grew in both the proficient and the advanced areas. So again, mirrors that chart that I showed you. Comparing the student population groups, this time compared to the nation, we have increases across most groups, with increases again for our students with disabilities and our English learners. Again, some of this is mirroring what we're seeing most recently in our other assessment results. Just as in grade 4, Indiana is one of the states that's scoring significantly higher than the average scale score for the nation. And then our overall state ranking for grade 8 is also 6 compared to our previous 17th. Same type of chart, only this time compared to the scale score, you can see that magnitude of the scale score difference compared to that ranking. All right, we ready for math?
Yeah, I think we should just flag again, adolescent reading is, in addition to math, and you mentioned this, but adolescent reading is also an area that we really need to lean into and focus on. And what we're hearing from some of our middle school and high school teachers, and we've talked about this before, is as a secondary teacher, you're really not often taught how to teach reading. But that is certainly a skill set and professional development that we need to work on as a state to make sure we have those opportunities out there. I know we have some out there today, but the opportunity ahead to really dig in for adolescent reading is there.
Okay, so turning our attention then to math, we'll start with fourth grade. So again, same charts. This is grade 4 math. You can see that both Indiana and the nation increased this time, so a little different story for the nation in math. For this grade level, you can see that we only increased by 1 scale score point while the nation increased by 2. So that's good. We're closing the gap there that the nation's growing, but we want to continue to grow even more.
We want to beat the nation, to be clear. We don't want that gap to close.
We want all students to
anybody
succeed
else
while Indiana
competitive
is
here?
succeeding more.
Come
Okay.
on.
Okay, achievement level percentages. So reviewing the percentages again of students at each of the achievement levels, Indiana grew the percentage of students achieving proficient and advanced as compared to 2022. The nation did as well, but at a higher percentage of growth. Their students grew, which includes our students as well, but overall grew 5 percentage points. And then for the various student population groups, if we look, we don't see the increases that we saw in reading across multiple groups. For grade 4 math, our students with disabilities declined 1 scale score. There was no change for our English learners, and Black students declined by 4 points on average. Again, the comparison amongst the states. So a little different story again compared to reading. Indiana did not score statistically different than the national average scale score, as did 29 other states. You can see that only 9 states were above, so a lot of states, this is an area to grow in.
Yeah, this is the only area that we're not statistically higher than the nation. And again, an area where we know we need to work on.
And then again, reviewing the top 20 states, so Indiana is ranked 9th this year compared to 11th last year. So while we didn't see as great of a growth in that scale score as we would like, we still did grow in our ranking. And then again, same information. You can see a little bit tighter group here with the scale scores, but you can see the magnitude of where we fall within that.
Yeah, this is another question that I've been asked. How could we not be higher than the nation and still be 9th? And this chart demonstrates that, as Lynn was pointing out. It's a much tighter bell curve there where states are. So really, if you look at the data, the states ranking 1 through 8 were statistically significant, and Indiana's number 9. So we're banging on the door, but we're not there yet.
Okay, and then lastly, looking at our 8th grade math results. So again, starting with the line graph. So, unfortunately, this one, both Indiana and the nation, we each dropped a scale score point. Looking at the achievement level percentages, Indiana moved the percentage of students scoring basic and proficient by 1 percentage point. So that was good. We were moving some up, but if you think back to that last slide that I had shown you where we didn't have much movement at all across the board with our various groups and their percentile rankings.
Can you go back to the 8th grade math?
Yep.
Just to flag the line graph. So just to flag this, and again, you probably can't see this in the back, but 2024, You can look at the American scale score and the Indiana scale score. So US is 272, Indiana is 278. But look across that line graph. It's the lowest we've been in 20 years. And that is what is generating the national headlines at the level that we're seeing them. And some of you may know NAEP also informs or can be compared to PISA, which is where we look across the world and how other countries are doing. And so in our country, we need to pay closer attention because none of us as states are really knocking it out of the park in math. We need to pay closer attention to what's happening internationally in the area of math because we are just getting beat on this. I think that's pretty startling when you look at that data.
Okay, so across the various student population groups compared to the nation, we have increases with our students who are economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities, but again, not the gains that we saw with reading. For grade 8, again, compared to states, you can see that we're back in that darker blue. We are one of the states that is scoring significantly higher than that average scale score for the nation. As far as ranking, we did drop in our ranking for our grade 8 assessment. So you can see here that we are 13th this year. We were 11th last year. And then that ranked order with the distribution of the scale scores, you can see not a little bit different story than that grade 4 that Dr. Jenner was just commenting on.
Yeah, this is, if you can see from the back, I mean, there's like clumps a bit, that's not a way to say it data-wise, but there's a big clump, cluster, thank you. There's a big cluster on one side of the scale score and then a big cluster on the other, not quite the bell curve that we saw. And again, it's something that our country is going to have to reckon with.
All right. Thank you.
All right, I know you're in a hurry, but board would love to hear any thoughts or questions that you have. And Lynn, if you need to run, we
can
can
stay if there's any questions.
Okay. Any questions or thoughts from the board? And if you could switch back to the view of our board members so I can just see if.
I think just the comment, one, thank you for this. This is really good.
Dr. Jenner, I have a question. I can't see the room.
Katie,
so I
yeah.
don't-
Give me just a second. BJ's talking, but I think his mic is probably adjusted for my loud voice. Why don't you lean in, say it a little louder?
Well, I know we want to get better every single day. It's always the goal. I think we also need to make sure that we recognize good news. And this is good news. I mean, I've sat here before when we didn't get this news, and it's not nearly as good to see. So I want teachers, educators to celebrate I'm a sports guy. So we celebrate this win, but we go back to practice on Monday. So, but we still have to celebrate this win today. I mean, when you look at this, there are a lot of good things going on in our schools. I remember a call with Katie a year or two ago, and she was like, okay, if you had to give me one priority, what would it be? And early literacy was the conversation that we had, and you can see the strides that she's making and the department's making and the teachers are making is all starting to come together. So that's what's exciting for me. So keep working, but really good job, folks. This is good.
Thanks for that comment, BJ. Katie.
Mine is more of a question that maybe we could come back to another time, but I was just reflecting on how tight the difference in the point spread is in the fourth grade reading space. I think it's 5 points maybe. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but it makes me wonder about outcomes. So there's a difference between us being number one because we're 5 points higher versus like what are the meaningful differences in the outcomes for students in that 5 point spread. And I'm just curious because it seems like with something that tight, I would wonder are there meaningful differences in the way that the kids are able to perform, or are we talking about, just really nuanced differences in those reading capabilities? So that's just something I am curious about as far as the emphasis, like the value to students in increasing that at 5 points, or going beyond that or something else. So would just love to talk more about that another time.
Yeah, I think just maybe one comment. When we look at those average scale scores with those line graphs, we aren't at the proficient level yet. And so I think that's our first goal, is to keep growing to get to that proficient level and then beyond.
Yeah, and Katie, and this is something just for the board to think through. Harvard and Stanford, led by Dr. Tom Kane and others, have been working through, it's essentially taking the national report card and making it a national scorecard and trying to understand, like, what states are growing the fastest. Now, that data is embargoed until February 11th. Otherwise, we would have laid that out today. But you can imagine probably what it's going to say for Indiana, right? Reading, we're moving. Math, we have work to do. But the next step, and I think they announced this last Wednesday as well, so I'm not getting over my skis on this. The next step is they're trying to determine what states would be willing to lean in to figure out, okay, what is working? Kind of to your point earlier, Scott, like those states that are really moving, Louisiana, Mississippi, Indiana went up in reading. There are some others, but those that are really moving, what are they doing? And what is working versus what is not working as well, that we should reallocate that funding. And then they'll do the same in math. Indiana probably won't be asked to do the math side, right? Because of just where our data is, but probably the reading side. But anyway, I wanted to flag that because, again, as states, we can learn so much from our peers, as we've learned from Mississippi Miracle. But stay tuned, more on that. But Harvard and Stanford are very interested in working with us on that future opportunity to learn more. Yeah. They also had it correlated. NAEP data and how we're doing was correlated to longitudinal outcomes. Everything from the obvious, like the positive outcomes, like graduation, a number of different outcomes there, but also some of the outcomes like, individuals who are committing a felony, or, right, it was both sides that they've correlated, and it's incredible how NAEP follows that. And again, I'm hoping Dr. Kane can come to Indiana and really show us more detail, but that's kind of how they're trying to break this down. What else? Doesn't look like anyone on the screen, anyone in the room. Scott?
Yeah, just, so one comment and then a question. The comment on kind of the negative correlation. So obviously in my previous life, I used to run the Excel centers, so for adults who had dropped out. And it wasn't one-to-one, but it was a highly correlated outcome of students who were below basic in reading through their elementary grades, going through, who then wound up dropping out and then eventually coming back, right? So our time and effort was really spent on reading instruction for people who now were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who had families and struggling in the workforce because of that. And so, like, this effort, my hope is, like, it puts places like the Excel Center out of business, right? Because we don't have dropouts and we don't have to do that. I think the other thing on the math, and I think just like we've done in reading, right? So we've invested a lot of time and effort, money in training existing teachers who have answered the bell and done a great job. Then we've also done some things that said, hey, schools of ed, within your instruction for future educators, you also need to beef up your reading instructions at Science of Reading. I think this gets to the math part, right? And it's a question. I would love to, I won't do it. I would love to survey our attendees here and say, how many of you love math,
We'll do
are
it.
really strong
Go
at
ahead,
math?
Scott.
Like how many of you feel great about your ability to do math? Okay. And I think, thank you and those who didn't raise your hand, thank you so much for being honest.
Can I ask this, a follow-up?
Yeah.
Who feels more comfortable teaching students how to read versus how to do math? Who's more comfortable with reading? Raise your hands high so we can see them.
Yeah.
We typically hear that from our
right.
teachers.
Yeah.
So it just was curious coming from you.
So I didn't want to generalize and insult anybody, but again, that shows, and I think that is not uncommon across, particularly in the elementary ed space. And I think that's an area where we have to probably reach out again to our schools of ed and say, hey, look, you have a role to play here as well, just like we're doing on the reading side. Because unless you have really good, strong instruction available to students, it's really difficult to move the needle on these things. And so I think that's, just like we took a holistic approach to reading, looking at it both on the current teachers and our future teachers, it's really doing the same thing in math. So thank you guys for first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for being honest, and like, go get them.
All right, anything else for Lynn? Well, Lynn,
thank you so much.
thank you very much. Good luck with your next presentation. Apologize to the next group why you were late. All right, so let's shift to, so we kind of talked through the foundations. We've got to build the foundations in students so that they're ready to go at the high school level. We've had so much robust discussion over the past several months in Indiana about how we can improve, how the future of high school could be better in Indiana. And we're already we'll highlight one this month, we'll highlight another one next month, but we're already getting people who are raising their hand, coming to us and saying, gosh, we have a great solution, we have a great opportunity. So today we're going to hear from one of those groups. So thrilled to welcome again Dr. Travis Hare, Chancellor of Ivy Tech Sellersburg, and Colonel Sean Eakin of the Indiana National Guard to share about this partnership opportunity specifically related to the enlistment and service seal in the future high school diploma.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary Jenner. It's an honor to be here. I bring greetings from President Ellspermann. We're actually having our State Board of Trustees meeting today, so she's on campus, on the Indy campus, conducting that. And then our other chancellor from Columbus, Stephen Combs, he has been helping. I'm the citizen of the group. He's the veteran that is helping us. He's the one that lets me know what all the letters mean whenever, because you guys use a lot of letters. So we do that. And then Dan Gilbert is a senior policy advisor. He's been a tremendous help here. And I'll introduce Colonel Eakin here in just a moment. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank General Lyles with the National Guard, who just retired. He's been amazing. Just a little bit about why I am here, and because I think it's important. It sets the stage, because what we're going to talk about here is a little bit of a tale of two cities. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I was a K-12 guy for 25 years. You said coach guy, I'm a K-12 guy. And a coach, a teacher, a high school administrator, central office administrator. And the one thing that I noticed was the impact our ROTC programs had in those high schools. And it's hard to believe, but next week it'll be 7 years that I've been the chancellor at Sellersburg at Ivy Tech, and I knew something was missing. So I went to President Ellspermann 3 or 4 years ago and said, you know, is there any way we can have an ROTC program at the community college? And you're going to hear a little passion here, but it's the backbone of our community. It is the students we serve. It's the future Little League coaches, the dance coaches, the cheer moms, the soccer moms, and it's who we need to work with. And I think it was just a great opportunity. So we had been having those conversations internally about how could we do this, and it was pretty tough to do. You had to do a cross-town agreement. We had met with the University of Louisville, and how do we do that? And it was really tough. So President Ellspermann knew we were doing that, and at some point she and General Lyles talked and met and said, you know, we need to come together. So let me attempt to do this. Okay, it's backwards. Let me.
Oh, you might have, do we need to look away so you can go back?
Nope, that's okay.
to the beginning.
So, there we go. So General Lyles and talked to President Ellspermann about this National Defense Authorization Act, and I think that's where each branch of the military has to produce something to Congress, a plan to Congress about how they're going to increase the enlistment. So that was the conversation General Lyles was having. President Ellspermann said, you know, I've got a couple of crazy chancellors that are looking to do something like this. Can we all sit down and talk? And that's truly where this started, didn't it, Dan? I mean, it was really, we just sat down and said, can we put our heads together? So we started talking about an enlisted training corps, an ETC, and it's a program that's aimed to offer a new pathway for community college students to enlist in the military. And it'll provide students a structured training experience similar to ROTC that will prepare them for the military service without requiring them to do a traditional boot camp. So the thought is that they would come in, be able to do their 2 years around military science, and then they would be able to, if they wanted to go into the military, pursue that 3rd and 4th year at one of our 4-year partners, perhaps in an ROTC program, or they could go into public service, whether that be police or fire or homeland security. So this is all about a public service opportunity. And we know this is important for a few reasons. One, it increases the recruiting needs. We know there's that out there. And we also know there are very few ROTC programs in the high schools. And I know that the 26, 28 high schools we serve, I think there are only 3 or 4 ROTC programs in our area. So it gives students that maybe weren't exposed to that, especially some of our rural students and those high schools that don't have it, this could be an opportunity for them to be exposed to this opportunity. And I also think it will help with retention with the military. So at the same time as this is going on, you all are doing the great work with the high school diploma redesign. And as you roll out the enlistment service seal, it became pretty obvious this could be something we need to talk about in a match. So we reached out to Secretary Jenner and we said, hey, we've been working on this for us, but it fits perfectly here. And I think it could really grow some traction and something that we're very excited to really step to the plate and partner not just with our students, but with high school students as well. So a little bit about what we've been up to. We have an IVYT class, so that's the introduction to college class. It's a 1-credit class, and it's about 16 hours that students spend in this class. I have taught this class before and on our campus, and I said, you know, this is a great opportunity to use this to introduce them to the military as well, because it's really an introductory class. It talks about here, if you're looking for, you know, where does the bursar, what is an advising, what is it you want to do, career exploration, and all of that just falls right in line with what the military and exposing them to military and public service. So this will be, it will more than likely be 4 class sessions, 4 hours at each session, really expanding or exploring about public service, like we talked about military, fire, law enforcement. And then the last meeting would do some type of experiential learning. So whether that's Muscatatuck or Atterbury or Fort Knox or anything that we could go to and take our students to. So we're very excited about this. We think it's just a great opportunity. And then
Can I pause there? General Lyles, something he talked to us about multiple times is how the National Guard was going to think about how to help us scale this support, right? Because every school is unique and different, which is a good thing, but every school has a different number of resources or teachers who could do this. And again, I think this fills an enormous opportunity gap that we have by not only having the course that is mentioned in the diploma seal, but also you mentioned Muscatatuck and Atterbury, which may not be common names for everyone in the room, but they're some of the top military training bases in the country, and they're right here in Indiana. And so really to be able to leverage that is very special. Yeah,
Sure.
jump in, BJ.
Who teaches these courses? Is this an IB Tech employee, or is this
That's a great question.
somebody in the traditional high
It
school?
would be an adjunct professor, so essentially.
In the traditional high school, or is it on
it-
campus?
It could be either way.
Okay.
It could be either way. I think right now, when we were rolling this out, we were going to do it on campus. And it would be, we had this conversation. There are a lot of folks in the military and the National Guard that could teach this for us. So we would hire them as an adjunct instructor to do that. I think there's more talk about the high school students. I think if they wanted to come this summer and take the class in the summer with us, they would be able to come to campus and do that. I think for us to go into the high schools, that's something we're very interested in, and that's why we're here to come to the table, but I think we've got to still work out those details.
Just, I mean, I do, not this work, but I do, like, when we look at scaling things and having CTE courses that are similar to this, the biggest hurdle, which I'm sure you've seen, is always, one, transportation, and two, who can teach those courses, because a lot of times, for us to hire someone, the salary is not always competitive.
Sure.
So if there would be a way, I'm thinking, okay, I'm being selfish, how can a student in Evansville benefit from something that you're doing, even with asynchronous learning or something like that? For you to talk about the ability to scale this, how can we do this as with WebEx, to where students all across the state can get this from the experts and it not have to hire a teacher in every individual building?
I think that's the beauty of all of this, is that we can leverage Ivy Tech. This is where we'll leverage 19 campuses. And that's the power to this, and all the dual credit and the partners we have with our high schools across the state. So I think that alone will impact what you're talking about. The other thing is, especially for this IVYT class, it's a bachelor's degree is the required to teach that class. So I mean, there's a lot of folks that could teach this class, and there's a lot of folks that are already interested. General Lyles resides in my area. You know, he and I have already talked about, you know, the possibility of him teaching this for me. So you know, I think there are a lot of folks, and we talked about that. So I think that's going to be the exciting part, but it also could be police or fire, or someone could come in and be guest speakers during this class. I mean, it's really about that public service and those opportunities and those careers in public service.
Can I make one comment as well? We're working with a group that works with military that's going into civilianhood, and one of their biggest issues is getting that bachelor's and certificate, and so looking at competencies, so that we're actually giving credit to these tremendous leaders for what they've done for our country, so they can teach these classes. I think one of the things I've learned in that project is the high suicide rates in military is often because when they come into civilian work, they don't have purpose anymore. And so how can we take that opportunity to get them connected with kids? There's no greater purpose than lighting up a kid and helping them navigate their career path, but we have to change how we're looking at the evaluation of who can teach these classes, and we need higher ed to come along with us to look at competency-based, look at alternative admissions processes, so that we can give credit to these great leaders that want to give back even when they leave the military.
I couldn't agree more, and there's a slide, and we'll talk a little bit
great.
about this.
Thank you.
But you said something, and the one thing that I have noticed as a chancellor, and I go in and speak to these IVYT classes or orientations, and the veterans that are coming back as students, okay? And they're career military, and they come back as students, and now all of a sudden, they're sitting next to 18 and 20-year-old students. They haven't been in a classroom in a while. Now I've got a computer in front of me. I'm used to books. You know, there's a transition there.
Sure.
And I think, and we'll talk about this, but I envision, my vision has always been, you know, we would have a special place designated on campus for this program. But I also think it's a place for those veteran students to come back. And I think there's just a genuine kind of a mentor, you know, hey kid, hang in here and do what I did for 20 years and look what this, or here's a career you could think about. And likewise, let me show you how to work the computer. You know, I mean, I think it goes both ways, and I think now all of a sudden the campus becomes a welcoming place for those veterans. As far as those veterans teaching classes, one of the things we credit for prior learning. So you know, we would look into that as well. So I think that's where it's just so powerful at the community college level, the flexibility to do exactly what you're talking about, whether it's instructors or the students. And I think that's what has really. That's why I'm so excited and really honored to be a part of this. Thank you. Cool. I'm going to move through this next slide. We are working on, you know, creating like a military science program, and I think Colonel will talk about that a little bit more. And BJ, to your point, this would be where we would be able to, you know, perhaps if we could do dual credit in the high schools for ROTC, we could do those kind of things. So these are the pilot campuses. We are ready to launch this first IVYT class. We're ready to go in the summer. So we're excited. We're getting ready to start that marketing. And then in the fall, we'll start these ETC programs, and it has Columbus and Sellersburg will be the two pilot campuses. We operate on an 8-week term, so there's a fall one, a fall two. So we want to kind of stub our toes and get the bruises out and do this, and then we'll be able to launch this statewide. So we're very excited about that as well. And then finally, and Ms. Hamill, I think this addresses what we were talking about, the alignment. So shared alignment, aligning with the DOE and the enlistment service seal, we've talked about that. Ivy Tech, as a college, we have made application to be a statewide collegiate Purple Star, veteran friendly. And we have done that on our Sellersburg campus as part of it, and very, very honored with what we've been able to do with that. And then just to increase the career pathways around public service, and I think this is exciting. I'll share real quick. Just this week, I was at our Leadership Southern Indiana Breakfast Series, and the topic was the new high school diplomas, and they had a panel of high school counselors, and they're talking to businesses and how do we work together. And they said this enlistment seal, not all of our high schools had an ROTC program. What can we do? So when we start talking to them on the side and say, hey, counselors, here's what we can do for those students, it just makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Secretary General? And I think that's what we're really excited about. So with that,
And Dr. Hare, before you introduce Colonel Hare, I do want to flag JROTC. Some may be wondering, because you let in with that, and we know it's valuable, but some may be wondering, why don't we just have JROTC at every high school? And so I wanted to just flag we talked about this some as a state board of ed. The federal government has capped the number of JROTC programs across the nation. So in Madison, we tried to get one for years and never could. So it's not that our schools don't want to add that. It's that there's a cap, and there are certain requirements to even get that.
That's right.
So that's where this fills such a need for so many schools since the cap is met, or if they don't meet those requirements. So just wanted to quickly flag that if anyone's wondering on the JROTC side.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, I'll turn it over to General Sean Eakin.
All right, well, this is Colonel Sean Eakin, but thank you.
What did I say?
You said general.
Did I give you promotion?
Well, I thought,
You did,
I
you
thought
did.
for a minute maybe I was wrong.
And my friends would be, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the General Eakin is deployed right now. That's my wife. So,
Oh,
but I do appreciate that, and she has always been the boss and will continue to be the boss. So, at any rate, but thank you very much. It is an absolute honor to be here and be able to speak with the Board of Education and yourself, ma'am. So I'm Colonel Sean Eakin. So I'm the commander of the 76th Infantry Brigade Combat Team. So that's 4,000 soldiers that is arrayed across Indiana in every one of the communities that was listed for the Ivy Tech for these programs. We have soldiers, we have units in. And of course, 4,000 of the 12,000 Indiana Air and Army National Guard. So a lot of leaders, a lot of talent in that team. I will tell you, as a commander of an infantry brigade, a big part of my job is going out to talk to the 50 company commanders that I have. Each company commander commands a company of about 130. 7 battalion commanders that have between 400 and 1,000 people in their battalions. And so 50 of those company commanders, we're talking from 27 years old to 35. And I will tell you, every time I speak to them, I am amazed at the talent that we have in the Indiana National Guard. People like Brandon Sackbun, 28 years old, mayor of Terre Haute, after he left Ranger Regiment. I mean, just amazing people. As I'm talking to them, I'm like, just great leaders, great mentors, and they could do a lot of good in this space. And those are just our company commanders, right? And so a lot of folks that can do a lot of good. I want to say, of course, I'm attending on behalf of General Munich. As a new adjutant general, he's very busy, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here. But he and the entire National Guard absolutely share the passion that Ivy Tech has in this space, and we look forward to working together to get after it. And I want to share a little bit about my story. So as we talk about public service, I've been in public service for 37 years. I joined the Indiana National Guard at 17 years old while I was at a junior in high school at Snyder High School, where I was mentored by some really great people. Mike Hawley, Russ Isaacs, or if anybody knows those names, but they, great leaders, great coaches, and they mentored me to be a really good football player. What we didn't talk about was being in the military, being a police, being a fireman, those kind of things. And so I stumbled my way into the National Guard because I wanted to take the ASVAB to get out of chemistry class. And it worked out well. And so they called me up a little bit after and said, hey, okay, you can go ahead and join. You did decent. Okay, great. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. Mom wouldn't sign the paper for 3 months because she also didn't quite understand some of it. Didn't come from family with law enforcement or with military, at least that recent military. And so I ended up joined a specialty that I really wasn't looking for, ended up into the specialty I wanted to later. But because I was uninformed, didn't know all that, all right? So I get through that, I use my benefits, I go to college, and I end up, at the end of the day, end up being a police officer in Fort Wayne for 15 years. And so when I did that, there was a lot of things that I learned, like working in my criminal justice degree and whatnot, that didn't show me the hands-on law enforcement, things like that you can really get out of a program like this. Because we always say in the military, leadership matters, and as educators, mentorship matters. And if we mentor people down one path, they're pretty pliable, at these ages, and we can certainly help them out. And so I think we can bring a lot of good in this space. I did, likewise, I have to mention my daughter did the exact same thing I did, but she only did that because she was listening to me. She didn't have somebody at the school that was mentoring her along that path. And with that, she's coming out of college with a paid-off college degree and a bunch of money in the bank. And so definitely some good space and definitely mentorship that's needed in these programs, and we're all in. So.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
very,
absolutely.
very much. Not only and yeah, we can give them an applause. Everybody's trying to. And I do want to open it up for the board online, if we could go back to the images online as well as the board in the room, to feel welcome to ask questions or share any thoughts with our partners.
I'm super passionate about this track, and thank you for all the work that both of you are doing. This is incredible. One of the things I've noticed in education and government is we don't do a great job of visualizing the opportunities for kids. Like if you do this in high school and then you do this at Ivy Tech and then look at all of these career paths and opportunities, I'm seeing we do a good job with traditional paths where there's apprenticeships or, industry sector partners that have come along and mapped that. But is that something we've done in this space?
Well, I definitely think it's something we can do a better job, at least personally, I'll speak first. But, in the National Guard, we talked about the 3 E's. I was able to do all three, because I enlisted while I was still in school. I enrolled in college, and it was kind of funny, when I went to college, I went to the information desk looking for a job. And they asked me if I had skills that I learned at the military school that I had just done, and I got hired right on the spot. And so the 3 E's, so I think that if we can show a path that can show the National Guard or some kind of a service, but also another, like I was going to college and always in the military, but also did that law enforcement and military at the same time, and they complemented each other. Every school I went to complimented myself as a police officer or on the SWAT team or whatever. So it really worked out to do both. And we have a lot of soldiers that do the same thing in the cyberspace, in a lot of different aviation, et cetera. So it just goes on, and I think there's a lot of value in showing that so that they can see that path. Because
Yeah.
I think people get into this, I'm either doing this or I'm doing that, and they
I
can
think
open that
awareness,
aperture.
just public
Absolutely.
relations on what is possible would be
Absolutely.
great.
No, I think he used the right word, path, and
Yep.
it's the pathways. Just like what you're doing with the high school diploma and the apprenticeships, this is the apprenticeship, right? It's
Absolutely.
very similar, right? And we're doing apprenticeships and work-based learning at Ivy Tech as well. So I think it lines up, and just like if a student goes to high school and they're in a CTE and then they come to Ivy Tech and then they transition to work or they transition to four-year, we have those pathways lined out for them so that they know, so they're not just taking classes they don't need. So we have those lined out, and that is certainly something that's going to come. I mean, when I say this is hot off the press, it's hot off the press. I mean, we're just getting ready to launch this for the first time this summer. But that is certainly the goal for what we're going to try to do.
exciting.
Yeah.
Well, as we partner, every one of those instructors will have, I mean, they will be somebody that did it.
Yep.
You know, so that definitely helps.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, Iris. So many students, regardless of their path, if they do it, it's like, okay, then what? Then what can I do? If I do this, then what can I get out of it?
Well,
What's
and,
could be
and
my
bringing
next
that
step?
down to
So-
like 8th grade so they can see, because I'm in the entrepreneurship space and it is completely off the radar, which I imagine this is as well. And it's like, if we don't get information out sooner that is clear and exciting and look at all these awesome opportunities to serve, kids are never gonna know.
So I'm glad you mentioned 8th
Do you want to stand, I don't, I feel
Sorry.
odd giving you orders.
No, it's all
Because you
good.
should be giving me orders, but you could
If-
stand at the mic.
If you
that'd
heard
be
me at the
great.
beginning, I'm real used to taking orders, but I'm glad you mentioned 8th grade because, you know, as I think about my path, you know, and I was an enlisted soldier for 12 years, then I became an officer and whatnot, and have enjoyed every rank I had. But I will tell you, I'm always impressed with my peers that went to service academies that were focused. And really, you got to start in 8th grade if you're going to go down that path. And to actually have somebody bring it to them and say, hey, here's a path. And oh, by the way, it could end up at the Naval Academy, West Point, or whatever. You got to start that pretty early. And I certainly was not, you know, later in life, it's like, boy, I saw that. Like, man, I could have done that if somebody was kind of helping me down that road. But back then, I was kind of like, okay, I want to play football. I'm going to get a college degree. Those were my goals. And then, but in what? I don't know, you know. And so all that mentorship helps, and all of it matters, and we're here to help, so.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Okay, well, a huge thank you for leaning in and helping us scale this, deploy this statewide. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have, you're leaning in. Do you have additional thoughts? Okay, I was just trying to read you, Scott. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.